Hi and welcome to this video. In this one, I'm going to show you how to create a REST API with Node.js. Very quickly before the start of the video, if you want to stay updated with the modern web development courses and content releases, please subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the video description. Happy coding and learning. Before going into the tutorial, we need to talk about what it is that we are building. So this is going to be a REST API. And before showcasing you how this REST API is going to work, what are going to be its features, I need to explain what a REST API is in case you have no prior knowledge of that. Now, a REST API stands for a representational state transfer API, and an API stands for an application programming interface. Now, in simple terms, a REST API is a way for different programs like apps and websites to talk to each other over the internet. That's the simplest explanation. Now, REST APIs, they use rules or verbs or methods like get or post, so one system can request or update information from another system. Now, the main use of REST API is to connect our front-end applications like React apps to backend servers. So here, what we are going to do in this video is we're just going to talk about the server side of a REST API. In case you are interested in learning more about frontend, I do have another playlist here on YouTube. It's React from Confusion to Clarity. You can take a look at that. So that's going to be the frontend side. But then in this video, we're just talking about the backend side. So we are going to talk about Node.js. We're going to use this Postman. And we're going to also use a database that's going to be a MongoDB database. And we're going to store our data in there. So how does this application work? In this app, as you open Postman, the reason that we're using Postman is because our app doesn't have a front end. We're not going to create one. So it doesn't have JavaScript facing code or React facing code. But in order to test our API, to see if it works, if we can use it to send data to our database, we need to have some sort of a front end. And that's why we're going to use Postman. So using this Postman, we can just test our API, and that's one of the features of this software. And I'm going to talk about this more and more once we get to actually setting up Postman. But here, I just want to show you how this API works. So we are going to have several different HTTP methods or verbs or rules. We are going to have one is going to be get, another one is going to be post, the other one is going to be put, and finally we're going to talk about delete. And I'm going to talk about all of them individually. Now our server, as you can see here, it is running on port 3000. So if we make any call to this port, localhost 3000, to this localhost, and if I send this, if that's a GET request, this is what we are going to get. Now, if I just add user at the end of this / and then send this, then this is basically going to retrieve all entries that we have in our DB. So far, we have 2. So this is the first entry, and this is the second entry. Now, where is this coming from? It is coming from our database. So here we have a user DB database. And then we have a users collection. This is a MongoDB. So it's a NoSQL based database. It's not tables, it's just JSON data. And the data is coming from here. And what we can do is we can go to our front end, which is Postman. We can add more data to our backend. Now, the way we are going to do that is we're going to change our get method to post, come to the body, and we are going to fill out a form. So the model or the blueprint for our data is as follows. So we're going to have a first name, a last name. The first name and the last name, they're mandatory. You need to provide them because what we are doing in the backend is on our databases, we're trying to create a user registry. So they should have a first name and last name. And then you could add an email, a company where they work, and then a phone number. but then the database is going to add this created at as well as the ID. So here for first name, I can add Sam. Let me just Sam. The last name could be Jackson. Email could be sam123@gmail.com. Company could be Triple H. Phone number could be 15457898. Just an imaginary one. And if this is a post request to this URL, as soon as I send this, not only will it add it to the database, but it will also retrieve it from the database for us. So we can see our record right here. Now, if I go to my database and refresh this, there we go. We have our Sam Jackson entry. So there goes the second method that we're going to use, a second HTTP method. Now, let's say you want to change one part of this data. So the way you're going to change any existing entry within your database is you select the ID, not the quotes, just the ID. You come to Postman, you're going to add another / and then add the ID because you want to change data, existing data for an existing record. That's why you need to target that record using its ID. And then you say, okay, I don't care about the last name. I don't care about the email or the name or the phone number. Maybe I just change the company. Or you know what? Let's just change phone number. So I'm going to say phone, and then I'm going to change it to all zeros. And as soon as I say, I shouldn't send it because now we need to select our put request. Let's send this. Now it is going to send back the updated data, but because we have sent all zeros, it's just going to reduce it to just 1 0. We could change this. We could say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and then 0. And now if I send it again, there we go. We got our updated data. So if I come to the DB and refresh this, we should see the new data here. So that's going to be the third HTTP method. And finally, we have this delete one in which we just add the ID of that target entry that we want to delete. And then as soon as I send that, it's going to say message successfully deleted the user or delete the user. There's a typo in my app. Anyway, but now if I just reload the page, we can see that entry is gone. So this communication, sending a put request to this URL, sending a get request, a post request, a put request, or a delete request to this URL, that's what this entire video is about. So we used REST API to send requests from our frontend to our backend using this HTTP standard. All right. So that's going to be it for the introduction of this video. Let's jump in and let's start setting this project up. To get started with the setup of our REST API, we need to have a couple of things installed, and I'm going to explain why we need these. The first thing is Postman. Postman is important because we're working mainly in the backend. We don't have any front-end facing interface for our application, for our REST API. So we need some sort of a way to make API calls. You could integrate a React application or a vanilla JavaScript application with this, a REST API, in order to basically replace a Postman, but I'm not going to do that because I want to show you how to create a REST API in Node.js, and frontend is basically not the focus of this video. So in some way, we need to come up with a simulation of a frontend, and that's what this Postman is going to do for us. This is going to act as our frontend, and then our API is going to make calls to a database, and it is going to change some data on the database. And I'm going to get into the details once we get to those parts of the video and get to that code. So you need to have MongoDB Compass installed as well. Now, if you just go to your browser and if you just search MongoDB Community Server Download, you're going to see this page. And in this page, you can just make sure you select the latest version, which is version 8. And it should be able to find it for your platform, or not, you can just select it from here. Now, I'm not going to show how to install MongoDB. I will sure to remember to put a link in the video description, and you can just go to that video description link, and that's going to be a link to a YouTube video. I have found out that that's the best installation guide for MongoDB. It has a little bit of a setup at first if you have no prior experience of Mongo. So that video is going to tell you everything you need to know about that. And the link is in the video description. Just go ahead, and if you can't install it on your own, you can just take a look at that. And for Postman, if you just go to postman.com, if you don't have this already, you're going to see here we have download the desktop app. You can just use it in the browser, but my suggestion is to download the desktop app. And for me, since I'm on Windows, I'm going to click here, and then you can just download the 64-bit. And the only thing it's going to do is just ask you for an account. And you can log in with any email, and that's it. So this is going to be the setup of our application. That's it. You need to have MongoDB and Postman. So now that we're done with our external software, we need to initialize a Node.js project in order to create a REST API. So if we want to initialize a Node.js project, we can just say npm init, and it's just going to ask a bunch of questions. And if I just say -y, that's going to answer all of them, basically the default answers. And I'm going to hit enter. This is going to generate a package.json for us with some rudimentary information like the name, version, the main. This refers to the main file of our application or our REST API. That's our index.js. And in here, I'm going to change the module type to module rather than common.js because we want to use the newer syntax, the import-export syntax. And let's save this. There is a couple of things that I want to install here as well. The first one is npm install Express. This is a backend server. This is going to create a backend server for us. It's a framework of Node.js that allows us helps us to create servers and middlewares easier. We're going to get to that. Next thing that I want to do is I want to have some way to keep my server running while I'm making changes, so I don't have to restart my server. So I'm going to install nodemon using npm i nodemon. And finally, I'm going to install mongoose. This is actually an ODM. It's an object data modeling library that we use for MongoDB. In short terms, what this is a library that we use in order to talk with our database. That's it. That's what Mongoose is. And I'm going to show you how we actually use this and how we make a connection with our database. So now that all of this installation is done, and I hope you have installed MongoDB as well as the Postman as well. Let's go ahead and let's get started. So I'm going to jump into my package.json. I'm going to show you some stuff. So since I installed all of these packages as dependencies, all of them are right here. All right. Now they're not development dependencies. They're actually the kind of dependencies that we use in development as well as production. That's why they're here. Now, in order for our server to run, I'm going to change the script from test. I'm going to set it to start. And let's get rid of this. The first thing that I want to do for this API is I want to create a server and I want to run that server. So we can listen for incoming requests from our frontend. What is our frontend? That's Postman. So here I'm going to say nodemon. And what is the entry point of this app? It's index.js. Let's save this. So this basically means now I can do npm run start. That's what that means. So let's come right here into our index.js. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to say import. Now, the type module helps us with this. Instead of saying require, which is the common.js syntax, we're going to say import. If you are coming from frontend, this is very familiar to you. This is how we write frontend apps as well. So we're going to import Express from Express. And let's go ahead and let's create an instance of an Express app. And what is this instance? Why do we need it? The reason that we need this is going to allow us to create an instance of an Express application. So that's what that is. What it does is it helps us to catch incoming calls, incoming requests. It helps us to run our server. It helps us with the answer as well. All right. And then now that we have our application, we need to have a specific port for our incoming calls. What is going to be that port? So the port is usually 8,000, 3,000, whatever. I'm going to call it 3,000 here. That's going to be our port. We need to have at least one endpoint for our API to work. And what is an endpoint? So I'm going to say the first endpoint. So an endpoint, what does it mean like in normal English? An endpoint, the point that's at the end. So this point, which is at the end, this is where a user sends requests. So whenever you go to a website and you do anything on that website, anything interactive, like you click a button, you fill out a form, what you do behind the scenes is you're calling a specific endpoint. So when you click a button, that click travels from front end, goes to the back end. And it is being handled by one specific endpoint. And then that endpoint decides when it receives that request, what should be the response to that request. So that's what it is that we're actually trying to do here. The first endpoint is the first thing that our application can do when it receives a specific request. Now keep in mind, any kind of server in the world, it can only handle requests to the endpoints that have been specified on the backend. So if there is no endpoint for that specific call, you're going to see a 404 page. That's why there is a 404 page. So we're going to have this method get on the app that we created. The first endpoint that we usually create is the home endpoint, which is shown by a /. And then here, the best syntax for me is we want to use a callback function here. And the best syntax is to use an arrow function. So what is this arrow function going to accept? It's going to accept two things. One of those two things is called a request, which is coming from the front end that the user sends. In this API, it's going to be our postman that is going to send it. And then we should respond to that request as well. However the request is, we need to respond accordingly. I'm not going to say how, but for now, we're going to make it as simple as possible. So we have this response.send method, and we are going to respond. You could do whatever here. I'm going to say node and express server is running on this port. Let's pass in the port there. So whenever I receive a call to the /, I'm going to send this message. I'm going to send a message that is saying Node and Express server is running on port. And then we have a template literal, right? So it's going to say on port on 3000. We could add a port word here as well, 3000. So this is handling that request. But we need to have our server listen for that request as well. So we have another method, and we do this only once. We say app.listen, we pass our port, and then another callback here. We need to show something in the console just to make sure that our server is running. So I'm going to say server running on port this. Let's pass in port. Let's save this. So congratulations, you just created the most basic server in Node.js with Express. So here we're going to say npm run start, and as soon as I hit enter, there we go. We can see we have, so what do we have here? Let's go over this one by one. Here we have our project name, and here this is the version, remember? And this is the start that we passed in. This is the entry point for our project. There is a bunch of information that comes from NodeMon here, here, Here you can read all about this. But where is our console log? So here is our console log right here. What did I say? I said, I'm listening on port 3000. Now, what about this message? Why don't we see this here? The reason for that is because we said console log. So this console log is going to log this message here. That's reason number one. The main reason is that this message is not supposed to come in the log. It is supposed to be sent back to the front end. So how do I see this on the front end? Well, that's where Postman comes into the picture. So if you go to the Postman home right here, if you haven't used it before, you're going to see an option like this, send an API request, right? So you're going to see that you can just click on this and it is going to give you some sort of a page like this. And in here, you can give this request a title if you want to, or you can just skip that. Now, we need to know what is our server. Where is our server running? Let me put Nodeman right in VS Code. So our server is running on localhost 3000. And then I could add the / or I could not add that. It doesn't really matter. Let's just send a request and there we go. What do we get? Can I zoom this in? Let me take a look at our options, view, zoom in, control equal sign. There we go. There we go. Very good. So we can see we have Express, Node and Express server is running on port 3000. Good, right? And let me zoom this out. How can I zoom it out? Negative sign. So there we go. I think that's enough. You can see our server is running. And there is just a couple of information here. Here we can see that it says 200 OK. That means we sent a request to which there was an endpoint configured. And then that endpoint sent us this response back. So this is if you were to send a request to this using HTML or JavaScript or React, this is the response you would get inside of the browser. The response is coming from backend. So now that all of this is clear, let's go ahead and let's come up with our folder structure. So I have a specific folder structure in mind. We're going to have 3 different files. We're going to have a controller file, controller.js. The controller job is to basically talk to our database, and it's going to control the different methods that we're going to use in order to add something to the database or retrieve something from the database. That's going to be basically be the controller. And then we are going to have some sort of a model for the database. What do I mean by that? What I mean by this is we are going to have a first name, a last name, a company, a phone number. So that's like a model or a blueprint for our data. That's going to come into this file. And then the different routes. Now, I don't want my index.js to handle all of the routes. It's going to get a little bit unreadable if I just add all the routes here. So you can see we handled one endpoint. Now, this is called an endpoint. You could call it a route as well. All right, so this is an endpoint or a route. So if I want to handle, I'm going to have several more routes here. I'm going to create a different file and I'm going to put all the routes in there. All right, let's just save this. So now that you know all of this, let's go ahead and let's make sure that the routes surround our entire application. But before doing that, you need to know what routes are if they want to surround your application. So here inside of the routes, let me show you how we actually create routes here. I am going to, now since I'm using these routes, basically instead of the index.js file, I'm using it here. I need to send it to my index because all of the routes, they should go back to my index file. That's the entry point of this API. And let me just bring this a little bit down so we have more real estate here. I'm going to say export default function. this is another way of doing, like using the module type module that we specified. I'm going to create a function and I'm going to call it routes. This is going to accept an application. The application is our Express application app instance that we created. So on the app, we have this route function or route method. The first route that I'm going to specify is going to be /. Well, do I have to specify this? No, because we have already specified that. So what is going to be the first one that I want to specify? You could call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it user because I'm talking with users, like I'm talking about users. And I'm going to hit enter, so it just arranges that a little bit better. And now, once the user goes to this route, what should be the user's abilities? What do I mean by that? So you see here we made a call to this endpoint, to this localhost :3000. Localhost :3000, this part, this right here, this is our backend. And the message, this is our frontend, all right? So here we have the backend, here we have the frontend. Cool. So, but there is something that I didn't mention. You can see we have a GET request. So by default, if I'm calling on any endpoint, I need to specify which HTTP method it is that I'm using in order to call that. So we have several HTTP methods. These are actually called methods because they do something. They are verbs. You could call them HTTP verbs as well. So a GET verb, it gets all the data from the server as it did here. So whenever you're making a call to any kind of endpoint on the server, you need to specify your HTTP verb. What do you want to do with that call? Do you want to retrieve the data, or you want to retrieve them and then delete them, or you want to retrieve them and then update them? So it's all of that. Now, we didn't specify that here because that's going to be the default behavior. But here we need to specify what methods or what verbs our routes can handle. So for the user, I need to have, let's think about this. So I want to have an ability to get to the user, and then I should have an ability to update user information as well. So there is going to be a GET verb, remember? And whenever I use this GET, there is going to be two things in there. One is going to be the request that the user has sent me from Postman in this scenario, or your React or JavaScript app or Svelte or Vue app, doesn't matter, anything that is front-end. And then there is the response that I sent back. So I'm going to say, how did we send the response? We said res.send, and then I could send whatever I want. In here, I'm going to say get request, just to show you. So do you want to add any other verb to your route or any other action to your route? Do you want to add that? You can add it here. So I'm just going to hit enter. I'm going to do dot. Now all of these are chained together. Remember, I'm doing dot and enter because I'm doing enter and dot because it's more readable that way. I'm going to add a post method because I want to update some information as well. So this is going to be request response, and the rest is the same. Send. Now, since this is a post request, I am going to say post so we can differentiate between these two requests. So that's one of the routes that we specified, and the server is running here. That's a good thing. It means there are no errors. So now we should be able to go to Postman and make a call to that endpoint. Now, remember, what was the endpoint? The endpoint is /user. That's the endpoint. So I need to add /user. I have the ability to make a GET request. That's what it is technically called. So I send this, I get an error here. Why do we get an error? Here it says cannot get user, and it says 404. Now we got this error. That's a very good thing because sometimes you get errors and you should know how to fix them. And the reason that we get this error is because our routes have no idea that this app exists. They don't know. The routes, they should surround our application, but in this scenario, they have no idea that that exists. So what we need to do is we need to import our routes from source routes. I just imported that, and I need to make sure that this routes function, it surrounds my application. And now the server crashed. So let's see what the problem is. Now that's why the terminal is open. You can see our server has crashed. And let me take a look at, let me just bring this up. Cannot find module routes. This should be routes.js. Save this. And now if I come back here, it says this has crashed. Type app.route get post p. I have a typo here. I'm sure you got that right. Post. Save this, and now there we go. Everything is back to normal. So I could do a couple of saves. You can see server running on port 3000. Everything is perfect. Now it should work. Now we are going to make a GET request to this endpoint. There we go. We get a GET request. Now how many requests did I handle on the backend? I handled 2 requests. One was a GET verb. The other one is a POST verb. For POST, I have this one. But what if there is a request coming in to my server that I haven't handled it using an endpoint? Then we get the same error, 404 not found. And that's why you see those 404 pages on the websites, because either the page that you're looking for or the request that you just made was not handled on the backend. Cool. So let's bring it back to GET. Let's save this. And now we're going to move forward with our API. Now, we have one endpoint here, that is one route basically here, that is the user route. I am going to have, now this route, this is going to get all the users for me, but I want to have some sort of a route that is going to get one specific user for me. And I could either add something to that user, delete something from that user. So I need to have a couple of verbs there as well. So I'm going to select this app. Now keep in mind, when I'm writing this app, the second one, the one that's right here, is not connected to this one. You can see there is space there. These two are different. So I could just keep entering here, and then Prettier is going to fix that for me, but it is going to send you, it's going to show you how this actually works. So what is going to be the route? Well, the route names, they should be short, and they should specify what it is you want from that route. In here, I want this to be put on the user, but then I want to grab a specific user based on the user ID. So I'm going to say user ID. I could just pass in user ID in here. And then we need to have what kind of a verb do I want to put here. So I'm going to put the put HTTP request. Let's add an enter there. Again, there is going to be a request, there is going to be a response, and then we send a response from the server. And what do we send? We are going to say this is a put request. And then let's copy this down below. I'm going to change this to delete as well. And I'm going to say this is a delete request. Let's save that. You can see there are no errors. Let's jump here. So now keep in mind, I said this, and I didn't explain that, did I? So here, this colon basically means that this is a URL parameter. What does that mean? It means this is a dynamic URL. It could be anything. It could be ABC. It could be 123. It could be any number of any possible sequence of numbers and characters. It means it is dynamic. And how do we create it? Well, we're going to get to how we create it. For now, we can simulate it. Since it could be anything, we can simulate that. So if I say 123, what if I send a GET request? It doesn't work because on this endpoint, we did not handle a GET request. We handled a PUT request. And there we go, PUT request. And we also handled a delete request. There we go, delete. So if I say delete 123, that means delete a user with an ID of 123. If I say put 123, it means update a user with an ID of 123. 123 is the user ID. so we can distinguish between different users. All right, so now that we have handled all of this, let's move forward, and I'm gonna introduce you to your very first middleware of this REST API. So we use middlewares in Node.js with Express in order to process requests before they reach our route handlers. So we have these route handlers here. We are gonna put the middleware in between these, and that it's gonna basically take a look at the request. It's gonna do something with it before it reaches our route. These middlewares, they're actually functions. That's a good thing about them, right? And each middleware, what you need to keep in mind is it's going to accept a request, a response, and a next function. Because whenever the middleware finishes, you need to call the next function in order or in the stack, so the application is always working. If you don't call it, your application is going to break down right there. So you can think of it like this. So there are three, like A, B, C, three people. So one of them draws something on the paper. They give it to the second person. The second person is the middleware. And they tell the second person, okay, give this to the third one, to the C. But the second person does something with the painting. But at the end of the day, the second person, the middleware, has to pass on that thing to the next person in order. So you need to pass that on. And that's what the next function is going to do for us. So let's go ahead and let's handle that here. Now, inside of my routes, in here, you can see for the first one that I'm going to handle is going to be the get. So we saw, as I explained, we have this next function here as well. And for this next one, what do I want to do here? Well, instead of saying res.send, instead of saying that, I'm going to open up curly braces, the function body. Now, request res next, that's our middleware, but it is an arrow function, so it's an anonymous function. We're going to log something to the console. We're going to say request from, and then we're going to specify where the request came from, and that is available on request.original URL. And then I could also log in the method, the request method. What kind of a method was that? And then what should I do? I should pass the painting on. I should pass the call on to the next function in the stack. So I'm going to call the next method here. And I just saved that. We don't have any errors here. So what do we do next? Well, we basically interfered. We got the request. We did something with the request, but then we passed on the request using next as well. But did we send anything to the client? We didn't send anything to the client. So let's go ahead and let's send that as well. So here, where this function body ends right here, you can see this blue. Let me show it to you. This blue, it ends right here. So after where it ends, I'm going to add a comma, hit enter for readability purposes. And in here, I'm going to create a function that is going to handle that for us, that response for us. It's going to be a request, response, and we need to pass in the next as well. And what do we do here? We basically say res.send. Well, we did something with the request, but we still need to send the response, right? And we're going to say get request success. Is that correct? Successful. Let's save this. Everything is working perfectly fine. Let's go ahead. Now, I am going to make a call. Let's bring this terminal up. You can see the last line, it says server running on port 3000. That's the last line running there. So here, on the user, remember, what was the HTTP method? It was get. So we need to do get. And I'm going to send this. We got get request successful. And then in here, you can see it says request from the user. And what was the request method? It is get. Very cool stuff, right? So take a look at that. Here is where we send the request. And here is our method. Well, this second one, it should say request type. And this should say request to, not request from. And now if I make another one, that is going to update it for me. There we go. Request to this. And the request type is get. Cool stuff, right? So this is in simple terms, what a middleware is. Now that our API is successfully handling our endpoints as well as the postman, so it's time for us to bring MongoDB into this picture. And the way we use we're going to use MongoDB is using Mongoose library. It is an object data modeling library for MongoDB and Node.js. And the job of this library, this Mongoose, is to provide a schema-based solution for our REST API. And it basically means it gives us a way to talk to our database. Now, if you have any SQL-related experience, especially SQL with Python, there is another sort of similar library in there as well, which is called SQL Alchemy. And that is an ORM, an object relational mapper, that we basically use in order to talk with our database. So you can think of Mongoose or SQL Alchemy as the middleware between your Node.js application or API and your database. So whenever you want to put something in the database, you need to call some methods, call some functions, because you want to either add something to your database, you want to delete it, you want to retrieve it from the database, you want to update it. So all of these, as I said, these are verbs. Verbs in programming, they mean functions, methods. So you need to have some sort of methods. And these methods, they come from Mongoose. So it's very easy for us to handle that. So for that, I'm going to jump into our Node.js, our index.js file. And in here, the first thing that I'm going to import is I'm going to import Mongoose from Mongoose. And this is going to help us connect to our database. So on the top here, I'm going to say mongoose.connect. We need to have a stable connection between our API, which is Node.js, and our MongoDB database. So the data transfer happens. Think of it like a cable that you transfer, or like data from your phone to your computer. I'm a little bit old school, so that's why I give you that example, but there should be some sort of a connection. It could be Wi-Fi or whatever, but there should be a bridge. And this is going to be our bridge. Now, what I'm passing here, most of this is configured beforehand when you install MongoDB, so you don't have to worry about this. You just write MongoDB : /2 local host. All right. And then after that, you write the name of your database. What should that be? I'm going to call it userDB. I'm just going to call it that. So this is going to make a connection. This is going to connect our app to a MongoDB database, which is called userDB. But keep in mind, this database is going to be on our local machine. This is going to be on my laptop. All right. Now, whenever I do that, what kind of information am I going to send to my database? Well, as I said, we don't have any front end. So this postman has to be able to handle all of that for us. So in here, the way that we're going to send data to our front end is going to be through a form. So if you just come to the body, you're going to see here we have, you just click on X, www form, URL encoded. This is basically, you can think of this as an HTML form. Because we don't have any front end, we need to use this postman to act as our front end. So we're going to use this URL encoded method in order to send user data from here to our database through our REST API. And we need to specify that here as well. So I'm going to say app.use. Let's select our Express, and I'm going to say URL encoded. And in here, there is just something that we need to pass in order to style this for us. And we're going to set extended, set it to true. Now, all of the data that we send are going to be in the form of JSON, so we need to be able to parse them as well in order to use them. So I'm going to say app.use express.json, and this is going to parse that for me. And here we're done. Let's go ahead and let's set up our schema. We're going to set that up in the model, model.js file. Now in here, I'm going to import Mongoose first, and Mongoose from Mongoose. Import Mongoose from Mongoose. And on the Mongoose, we have an object. So it's Mongoose. It's called dot schema. Where is it? Here we go. And I'm going to store this inside of a schema with a capital S. This is going to be the schema of our database. A schema in a database is basically a blueprint for our data, the layout of the data, the structure of the data. It's a little bit of a fancy word, but that's what that means. So I'm going to say export const. You could call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it user schema. And in here, I'm going to say new. Let's select our schema up above, and I'm going to create a new schema. Now, keep in mind, the data that we send to our MongoDB, that's going to be an object. That's going to be in the form of an object because this is a NoSQL database. It works with JSON data. So we need to have something that looks like an object. Here we go. We have curly braces. So what kind of a data do you want to create in there? So do you want to have a first name? I'm going to add that. What comes after the first name? I'm going to explain that later. So what do you want to have? It's completely up to you, but make sure whatever you write inside of the schema, you should provide the same kind of information when you're making a call to your database through your REST API. It should be the same thing. So if you write first name, it should be first name. If you write last name, it should be last name when you're sending data to the backend. If you write something else that you have not written in the schema, it's not going to work. All right. And then I'm going to add the email. I could add where this user belongs, which company the user works, company. I could add a phone number, and then I could add phone number, and I could add when this user's data was created. Now, there is a ton of errors because we need to specify what the type of these are and if any of these are required. So here I'm going to say the type of this is going to be string with a capital S. And is this required? Yes, this is required. So I'm going to say required. And what is the message? I'm going to say enter a first name. Very good, right? I'm going to copy. Let's add a comma at the end of it and then copy all of that, put it right here. So last name type is going to be string and required is going to be this. Cool, right? And then for email, let's add that here. What is the email type? It is string, but you could just pass in the name and that's going to be enough. Let's copy this. Same goes for company. Let me bring back my sidebar. And then same goes for the phone number, but the type of this is number with a capital N. And this one, what about this one? So this is going to be a different type. The type of this is date, and the default is going to be date.now. This is our schema. Cool stuff, right? So you can just pause the video, take a look at this, but I'm sure it's going to be easy for you. We can just effectively close this model and move on from here. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an endpoint that we can use in order to call the data. We don't have any kind of data inside of our MongoDB database. So we need to put some data in the database in order to get the data from the database. So how do we put data on the DB? Well, we use the post method. Remember, we handled that. So let's go ahead and now we jump into our controller. So the controller is going to talk to our, using our Mongoose, talk to our database. I'm separating all of the logic so it's easier for you to understand. The first thing that I'm going to import here, that's going to be Mongoose. And let's import our schema as well. Import, what was the name of that? User schema? User schema from, it is from model.js. Very good. And now let's go ahead and let's create our very first controller. And it is called a controller because it controls the logic for handling our incoming requests and processing the data and basically handling the database side as well. So here I'm going to say export const. I'm going to call this. Now this controllers are basically functions. You could call this whatever you want, but make sure to call it something that makes sense. I'm going to say add new user. This is going to add a new user because we don't have any users on the database at first. Like initially, the initial state is we don't have anyone in there. Let's go ahead and let's populate this. Now here, what I can do is I could wrap this inside of a try catch block. And the reason for that is if there is any error, it's going to basically show us the error message. But before writing inside our try or catch block, we need to use our user schema. So in here, I'm going to say const, I'm going to create a user, and this is going to be mongoose dot model. And what should the model be called? I'm going to call the model the same thing, user. And let's pass in our user schema that we have imported here. There we go. So we have this user and we're going to use that here to create a new user. So I'm going to say new user. Let's use our new user. And what is this going to accept? Well, where is the data coming from? It's coming from our request. But remember, when I went to Postman, I said request.body. So it's going to come from request.body right here. So this is going to be our new user. And then we need to have some sort of a method in order to save this user to our database as well. So I'm going to say let saved user should be equal to, now the operations that we do with our database, they are going to be asynchronous. So we need to convert this from a simple function to an asynchronous one. And I'm going to use the async await. That's the latest syntax and the sweetest and most simplest one. So why do we use asynchronous? Because this is not going to work synchronously because this is non-blocking. We want it to be non-blocking because whenever we save a user to our database, it's going to take a few milliseconds, maybe less than that. But still, if it is synchronous, it's going to block the flow of code. We want it to work in the background, but we want our code and our server to run. Imagine every time you want to post a picture, the Facebook page crashes. It doesn't work like that. It should be asynchronous. So here I'm going to say new user dot save, and this is going to save it for me. And finally, what do I send back to my user? I'm going to send back some data as a JSON. The reason that I'm sending JSON data is because whenever you add a front end to this API, you know how to consume JSON data. You are just going to parse it. And then from that point onward, it's going to be a JavaScript object and you can populate your front end app with it. So what do we send? We're going to send the saved user. Oh, the S is also capital. Let me just lowercase. Oh. These should not be capital. So let me lowercase the S. Lowercase this S, this one, and this one. Now, what if there is an error? What if there is an error? We're going to say catch error. And then we're going to say response.status. The status, you have already seen a couple examples of errors, right? The status was 400. And then we're going to send a response as well. That's going to be our error message. Error.message. There we go. This part is also done. Let's make sure that our route can handle this controller for us. So we need to jump into our routes. And in here, I could keep my middleware here, but keep in mind what kind of a request this is. This is a post request. Let me get rid of this. This is a post because we want to send some data. We want to store some data inside of our database. That's why this is going to be a post request for us. So if I come, let me just save this. If I come here, I'm not going to touch this get. I'm going to come into my post request, but instead of the post request doing this, I'm just going to say add new user, and I just imported that as well here. And I'm going to say .js. All right. So the post method is going to add our new user. Let's save this. We don't have any errors. That's a very good thing. And now we should be able to send something to our database. So first off, the verb should be post. The endpoint could be user. Yes, it could be user. But then if you're here in the params, you need to go to the body and you need to click on this form encoded, URL encoded. And in here, I'm going to add first name. Make sure it's the same thing as you added there. It's going to be Jane. We have last name. Remember, there are two things that are required. That's the first name and the last name. And let's add Doe. All right, moment of truth. Send that. There we go. So it says user validation failed. First name, enter a first name. We did send that. Oh, the problem is I have lowercase this n, so it's a typo. And now let's send it again. And there we go. Congratulations. You just created a record on the database. Now, I missed something, and that is you need to have this local host running. So you need to say connect. And as soon as you say connect, let me zoom this in. Here is our userDB. Congratulations. And in the userDB, we have our users, and there we go. This is our very first user. And here is the ID for the specific user. And now its first name is Jane, last name is Doe. Now let's go ahead and let's add another user. Let's here. So remember our schema, right? We had company, and company, I'm just going to say XYZ. And then we had a phone number. I forgot, was the schema, let me take a look at my schema. So all of these are lowercase, the first character. Okay, so phone has to be lowercase. And this could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. That's the phone number. Then we said created that. We don't need to add that. That's going to be added automatically because we added a default. You could add a date here, or you could just go with the default. I'm just going to go with the default. And now let's change. This time it's going to be John Doe. Let's add that. There we go. So we got John. Now I need to explain what is happening here, because it might be like a little bit like what is happening here. So what is happening is we send some data to our backend. The first name, the last name, the company, and the phone number, along with their data, along with all of this. I should do it like this. Go away. All of this data. As soon as I say send, all of them go to this endpoint. So this is my HTML form. This right here is my HTML form. I'm in my HTML file. Okay, so I send all of this information to this endpoint using the send method, this send button. And this is a post request. So all of that information is coming to my route. Why is it coming there? Because I sent it to this /user. It is going to come to this post. What was the verb? The method. It was the post. And what is that calling? It's calling add new user. What is this add new user? Now from here, I'm going to jump into the add new user file. Okay, so I'm reversing my steps, right? Add new user is an asynchronous function. It has a try catch block. In try, this is the positive. In catch, this is the negative. This is the error. So in positive, I create a user here using the request body. Now remember, I received information from my postman, and the information is inside of this request body. Okay, so I create a user using that information. I then save that information to my database. After I save that information to my database, I send that information back to the front end. And then the information is going to be shown right here. So this is the information that has been sent back from the backend using res.json. This is the information. So we added these, we sent them to our database, and then using our server, we got them back here. Why? Because we need to have some sort of a way in order to understand that our API call has worked successfully. Otherwise, we have no way of knowing if that has worked successfully or not. And this is the cycle, how this works. So what is this user? Well, this big capital user that I have right here. Well, this is a model. Why do we say model? Because we're talking about database. What did we call that? We call that user. And where is it coming from? It's coming from this user schema. Okay. What is user schema? User schema is a blueprint of my data. And this blueprint is very important because my data is not flexible. You cannot, if I say first name, that's what you can send to my database. So I, as the database administrator and the backend engineer, I'm saying, okay, this is the only information that I'm going to accept. If you send me your credit card or your birthday, I'm not going to accept it. This is the only thing that I'm going to accept. And then I send all of this to my database. So here we have our users. Now, if you just go ahead and refresh this, the other user is going to come here as well. So now that we are able to send a post request to our server in order to send user data through our REST API to the backend, it's time for us to handle other requests as well. And for this REST API, I want to be able to handle a GET request, a PUT request, as well as a delete one. And it's all of them are going to go the same way. We're going to have a controller that is going to basically have some sort of a method or a function for our controller, and then that controller is going to come into our route, so our route can handle the function or the method for our controller. We no longer need this model.js file. I just closed it again. And yeah, this is how it's going to go. Now, there is something that I wanted to mention about this. So here, I need to explain this. This user DB, as you can see with the database icon, this is our database. And the way databases work in MongoDB is they have collections. We don't have tables like SQL, but we have collection of these kind of objects. You can see this kind of object. But this users, it's lowercase. Where is this coming from? Where did I specify that? It's basically this. We said, okay, this is our collection name. Now, the reason that it is lowercase and pluralized, that's what Mongoose does. So I could have just written users here and it would have done the same thing. It would do the same thing for us. So it lowercased the collection name and it pluralized that as well. It added an S there. That's the default behavior of Mongoose, unless explicitly specified otherwise. This is how it's going to do. So I feel like this was like a point of unknown or ambiguity, like where this user's collection came from. And then the data, you know where they come from. They come from here, from our postman, or basically from our front end. The next endpoint that I like to handle is the get endpoint, in which we are going to get all of the users or all of the records from our database. So far, we know that there are only 2 entries within the database, and we can select both of them. So let's create the handler for it. I'm going to say export const get users. This is going to be an async function. We're going to have a request and a response. So what do we add here? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add our try catch block just to catch if there are any errors. So within the try, we can select our user. So user, and on the user, we have this find method. Now, do I want to find a specific method, a specific user, or do I want to find all of them? I want to find all of them. So I'm going to pass in an empty object in here. We're going to do this asynchronously. And the result, I'm going to store it in a variable and I'm going to call it users. Now, after I've selected all of the users, I'm going to convert them to JSON and I'm going to send them as JSON. So that's going to be my try block. What about the catch block? If there is any user that doesn't exist and we try to get that, we're going to add a status of 500. And then we are also going to print out the error message. So error, this is going to be error.message. There we go. Let's save this. Now, we need to make sure that we handle this within the endpoint. So within this routes handler, where have we specified the get method? It's right here. So far what the get method does is it has this middleware right here. This is our middleware where it does something when the request is received before we send the response. So I'm going to keep the middleware here, but I'm going to change how the response is sent back. So for this one, what we can do is we can get rid of all of that and we can call that function. So the function is get users, and I just imported that from our controller.js as well. Let's save all of that. We don't have any error. That's a very good thing. Let's jump into Postman and let's test this. Now, the way that this is going to work is we need to change this to a get method, and the endpoint to which we make this call is going to be localhost 3000/user. That's where that has been specified right here. So this is the endpoint or the route to which we make this request. So we don't send any data, so I'm just going to set this to none, and let's send this request, and there we go. So what do we get? We get two different objects. That's the first one. It is a JSON object. We know that. That's the first one. And this is the second one. Why two? Because we only have two records inside of our database. We just handled that route here as well. So in this manner, we're going to move forward and we are going to basically handle all of the routes here. And since we have our middleware, you can see we have the request to /user, and the request type is a get. Let's go ahead and let's try to implement the kind of get method that is going to get one user for us from the database. We can do that as well. So the first thing that we need to do is, much like before, we need to create the handler for that. So for this one, I'm going to say export const. Now we want to get one user. So I'm going to say get user with ID. And this is going to be an async function, as we know so far. So request, response. What do we want to do here? The first thing that I want to do is add our try catch block. And here we have the error. I can handle the error first. So response.status. I'm going to send a status of 500.json, and the error is going to be the error message. There we go. But what do we want to do within the try? So we don't want to create any record, and we do not want to get all of the records. We just want to get one specific user based on the user ID. Now, if we want to get a specific user, we need to pass in the ID for that specific user. If we don't pass in the ID, how would the database know which user it is that we want to get? So the ID of the user that we want to retrieve from our database, that is going to be included within the request that is going to be made to our DB through this REST API. That's going to be that's something that's going to be included within the request. So let's go ahead and let's implement this. I'm going to say const user. I'm going to store the user here. This is going to be an asynchronous response. Let's grab our user, and on there, now we want to find one record based on ID. So let's go over our methods that we have here. So let's move forward. Let's go forward. So we need to look for something that is find, and we want to find by ID. So this is the method that we're going to use. And then where is the ID going to come from? That's going to be available on the request. Now, when I created this right here, when I created this, I said this is a URL parameter or a dynamic ID or a dynamic route or a dynamic parameter. So this is basically included in an object on the request that is called params. If you have used any kind of routing on the front end with React, it is the same idea. So you have this params object that includes this ID, and we want to select it from there. So here I'm going to say request.params, and then I want to take a look at the user ID that the user has sent along with the request. All right. So it's that user ID. This user ID is the same thing that we passed in right here. But since there is a colon, that means it's going to be dynamic. So we get this and we send it to the user. We send it to our frontend. So the frontend makes a request with this user ID. We send the user back to the frontend, and we have stored the user here. So let's save all of that. Let's come right here. Now, within our routes, we need to be able to handle this one as well. So let's come here. We already have a get method here where it gets all of the users. What I can do is I can create another get method here, or get verb here, and I can say get user with ID, and I can just import it immediately as well. Let's save this. Now, we need to have the ID, right? So I can select the ID of Jane Doe. Let's just copy it. Come here. Now, it's a GET request. We know that. After the user, I'm going to pass in the ID, and I'm going to send this. And there we go. This is the user that we got because we selected the ID for Jane. Again, if you want to select a user by ID, well, you should pass in the user ID. This could be an employee ID, an employee number, a serial number. It could be anything, but it has to be something. All right. We could select John Doe as well using the ID. Let's just pass in there. So as soon as I send that, you can see it says John Doe, the company, the phone number, and when it was created. Very cool stuff, right? Next up, I want to be able to actually make changes to a specific record inside of our database. So we're going to use the put, we're going to actually create a put endpoint, and we're going to change how the route is going to be handled for that. So let's go ahead. Let's implement this. I'm going to go to my controller, and in here, I'm going to say export const. What is going to be our new controller? We can say update user. Now, keep in mind, whenever we want to update the user, we need to pass in the user ID so we distinguish which user it is that we want to update. And then we want to say, okay, what part of the user that we want to update. I'm going to break it down for you so it's easier to understand. We have this request, we have the response. We know all of that. We have our try block, and let's grab our catch error. And for the error, I'm going to say a response.status. Let's pass in a status of 500.json error.message. There we go. So let me just delete one of the dots. Now within the try, what do I want to do? Again, we're going to have our await the user, and on the user, we have several methods. Now we want to find one, and then we want to update as well. So let's take a look at our methods. Here it is. So we can say find by ID and delete. No, that's not it. I can say find by ID and update, but then I have this one as well. Find one and update. I'm going to use that method. So for this one, I am going to pass in an object. The first thing that it's going to accept is going to be an object. I'm going to say, okay, there is going to be ID. ID comes request.params.user_ID. This is where the ID is coming from. And then the data that I want to update this is going to come from the request body. Why is it coming from the request body? Because that's where we created our first user. See, request.body. So when I said add new user, I used request.body. And remember that, right? Here we go to the body. Let me just bring this down. And we go to the URL encoded, right? So it's on the body, the new information that's going to come down. So the last thing that I'm going to add here is going to be an object that's going to say new true. The reason for this is whenever I send back the response, I want to send the updated user details. So if I change the username, when I send back the user, I'm going to send that back. That should reflect the new and updated information for that user. Let's store this inside of a variable. I could call it user. Or I could call update user. I could call this updated user. And then what do we do next? We basically send it. So response.json updated user. Let's save that. Now we need to make sure that our route can handle this. So which one was responsible for it? That's the put method. So I'm going to get rid of all of that. And instead of that, I'm going to say update user, and I just imported that here as well. So let's save that. Now, let's select a specific user and the information that we want to change for that specific user. Let's say I select this John Doe, and I want to change the company. Instead of XYZ, John Doe is going to work now at TRY. But what is going to be the method or the verb? That's going to be put. And now keep in mind, I am going to send back the updated information because I said true, new set to true. Let's send this, and there we go. Now you can see the company is TRY. There we go. And now if I take a look at my database, refresh this, what is it showing? It's showing the updated information, which is TRY. Very good stuff, right? Now that we have updated John Doe's record, the company from XYZ to TRY, we saw that here as well inside of our MongoDB. What we can do is we can actually select this Jane Doe and we can add a new kind of information here as well. So we can see it says first name, last name, and then created. If we take a look at where is our model? We have first name, last name, and then we have email, company, and phone. But Jane Doe doesn't have any of these, so we can add an email to this record. I'm going to copy. I just copied the ID. I'm going to pass the ID here, and instead of company, I could add a company as well. You know what? Let's add a company. That's going to be ABC, and then I'm going to add an email. How is it written here? It's just email, okay? And I could say Jane 129, I don't know, at abc.com or ACB, ABC. And this is a push request. Let's send that, and there we go. Now you can see Jane has a company, and it has, and the Jane record also has an email address. So if I come right here, refresh our database, both of them have been added here as well. So not only we can change existing data, we can add more information to an existing record as well. So both of them fall under the same category of put endpoint. The next endpoint that I'd like to handle is going to be the delete endpoint. And the delete endpoint is going to be our last endpoint. So here I'm going to say export const. I could call this delete user, and this is going to be an asynchronous operation. We have our request and we have the response. Now in here, what I'm going to do is we need to grab the user that we want to delete, but then how do we delete that user? Well, we need to have the ID for the specific user that we want to delete from our database. So I'm going to say await user. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the dot notation. Let's take a look at our delete methods, A, B, C, D here. So we want to delete only one. Do we want to delete many? No, we want to delete one. So I want to delete one record from the database. The record is going to have an ID. The ID comes from request.params.userID. That's going to be the user that I want to delete now. After I deleted the user, do I have anything regarding that user? No, I don't. So it doesn't make sense for me to store this anywhere, but I need to put it inside of our try catch, right? So I'm going to create my try, put that there, and I'm going to have my catch error, and I'm going to put that here. The error is going to be the same thing as this one. Let's put that there. So that's why this line, this one, I'm not going to store this in any variable because we just deleted that. We don't have anything. Now, if I've deleted that, what am I going to send to the front end? In the previous iterations, what we did was we did something with our database using any database method. So find one and update, that's a MongoDB method. Let's go up. This find by ID, this is also a MongoDB method. All right, let's go up. This find is also a MongoDB method. So these are, that's why I said this controller is going to work with our database. So now that we have done all of that, what we did basically was we stored the result. So we stored the result here, and then we stored the result here because we had a result to store in the first place. But once I delete, do I have anything to store? No, I don't. So I don't store the result of this in a variable because there is nothing to store. And then if there is nothing to store, what am I going to send to the front end? Because here we stored the result and then we send that to the front end. So I can't send anything to the front end, but except for a message. And the message could be just a reassurance that we successfully deleted the user that you requested. Successfully deleted the user. I'm going to say the user because by this time I'm going to know what the user was that we deleted because I got the ID for that user. That's why I can say the user. Let's save that. Let's make sure our route can handle that. So here we are with the delete. I'm going to get rid of this and it is delete user. I just imported that as well. Let's save it. Now, here we have two records inside of our database. Let's go to here. I'm going to click on delete, make sure this is none, and I'm going to try to delete both of our records. So this one belongs to Jane Doe. Let's send this. Now here it says successfully deleted the user. If I come right here, refresh our DB, we don't have anything, but then we have this user as well. Let me copy that. Put it right, you know what, just put it there and send it. And there we go, successfully deleted the user. And now if I come right here, it doesn't have any data. And so that's it for this video. Let's go over what we actually did. So we had all of these controllers. Every controller had one method that he worked directly with the database. And we had our schema imported from our Mongoose, so we could work with that. So we had one abstraction. You could call these DB abstractions as well. Well, the main focus of this video was not these. It was just how we handle these within our routes. It was how the REST API worked. So we talked about several methods or verbs. We talked about the get, we talked about the post. Again, we talked about the get, we talked about the put, and we talked about the delete. We had one endpoint here, which was a dynamic one. We had a fixed endpoint here, and we also had our main endpoint right here. This is the main part of our server or our endpoint. So this is the main endpoint. So what we did was we created a REST API or a RESTful API that had the ability to handle a get request and a post request to this / user endpoint, and it also had the ability to handle get, put, delete requests to this endpoint. And in the process of that, we created several database abstraction layers, in which we had one that was to add a new user. The other one was to get all the users. We also applied the abstraction to get one user, update one user, and then delete one user. So this is like all of the basic stuff that you're going to need when you want to get started with creating RESTful APIs with Node.js, Express, and test them with Postman, as well as store data on a MongoDB database. So with this, our video comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed this project. I really enjoyed creating it, and I enjoyed even more teaching it. See you in the next one.